an astonishing new row has broken out over the trans issue between Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling and Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. And I have to be honest with you, I am totally on the side of J.K. here. So she posted on X, all those people who tell me support for women's single-sex spaces means I must support reform, which I don't, appear to share exactly the same opinion on women's single-sex spaces as reform. She is referring, of course, to the party deciding to sign as some type of law and order czar a woman called Vanessa Frake, who has been very public in the fact that she believes trans women, so let's just be clear, blokes, penis holders, should be allowed to be housed in certain situations with female prisoners in women's jail. Yet despite knowing that, Nigel Farage still decided to make this woman the centerpiece of his Law and Order campaign this week, releasing this very glossy promotional video. Watch.
My name's Vanessa Frake. I am a former prison governor and author. I started my career in the prison service in 1986 as an officer and worked my way up to governor. I worked at various prisons around London and finished my career off in 2013 at HMP Wormwood Scrubs. For decades, I managed violent offenders, gang leaders and murderers. Our prisons are at crisis point. We have reached the situation where consistently governments have bled our prisons dry.
So, in lots of ways, she seems like a qualified woman, okay? Seems like she did a good job as a tough prison governor. But unfortunately, there is an issue that is so much more important to virtually any sane person in this country, especially reform voters and especially female reform voters. And that is on this absolute desire to end the bullshit and the madness and the anti-scientific heresy around the fact that in any case, a man can become a woman and can be put in a woman's space or put in a women's competition. Yet when she made her first big media appearance on behalf of Reform UK, she went down that path. If you're enjoying what we're doing here on Outspoken, please consider joining our thriving community over on Substack, www.outspoken.live. You can sign up completely for free, but Substack is so important to me. It is a free speech platform. It protects me from big tech cancellation. Plus, you get to communicate directly with me. Head on over www.outspoken.live, enter your email address and sign up today.
Should trans women be automatically removed from all women's prisons all the time?
No, I don't think they should. What I do think is that each should be risk assessed on an individual basis. I think it depends on a lot of factors. And the prison service is, my life was spent doing risk assessments. And, I think based on that risk assessment depends on where that person should go.
But the Supreme Court might actually check, the ruling by the Supreme Court might say, actually, all prisons have to be, no one who's not biologically female should be in a women's prison.
Well, they may well do that, but I could imagine that there will be several prisoners who will probably have their solicitors on that and challenge that ruling. Look, I'm not an expert on trans people. All that I know is that everybody should be treated with humanity and decency.
Okay, now you could say that's a personal opinion. Now, in my view, it's a completely batshit personal opinion, but okay, it's a personal opinion nonetheless. So when Nigel Farage was asked about this at his major Law and Order press conference, surely, having seen that this issue just won Donald Trump the White House, he would just shut it down. Surely, right? Okay, we know Nigel Farage is now moving to the left on every issue, but surely this is one issue where he won't lose his mind. Sadly not.
Well, when it comes to trans women in prisons, isn't it interesting that we run our country with people who become ministers, who generally have absolutely no idea of the subject matter that they're talking about. I've personally never worked in a prison, so I can't answer it, but I think you'll find that the answer that you'll get from somebody who has worked in prisons at the highest possible level is, I think basically it's about risk assessment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we all know what the law is. I'm not going to go back over that yet again. But to my mind, everybody who is in prison deserves to be treated with humanity and decency. And that includes female prisoners and it includes trans prisoners. You know, everything in the prison service is risk assessed. And I am sure that the prison service will tie itself up in knots over the trans issue, just like many other public sectors have. And as Nigel said earlier, you know, we are at the beginning, and that is something that we will need to speak about clearly.
Yeah, but in terms of the problems in prisons, it's a relatively small one.
Yes, it is.
But it doesn't matter if it's a small problem in prison, it's a massive problem in society. And your responsibility, and the only reason that we're ever going to trust you to potentially be in government is if you can say, Mr. Farage, under no circumstances will biological men be forced into women's spaces. And you couldn't do that. You failed a fundamental test. And so I know how Reform UK works on these things. They immediately think, okay, we've got to do damage control here. We've got to do damage control. I know. We're going to put this woman on GB News with Martin Daubney, who is a Reform UK propagandist, very nice guy, but, you know, never asks a difficult question. And that's what they did. However, the damage control interview turned into its own disaster.
Vanessa Frey, we have to address the issues, of course, that have been seized upon by your political opponents, by the press today, and that is the topic of trans prisoners. The Supreme Court ruling states quite clearly biological men are men, they can't become women. Even Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has said that no serious trans woman, that's a biological man, could ever be allowed into the female prison estate. And yet today you said this should be judged on a case-by-case basis. Vanessa, are you going woke?
No, I am not going woke. Is treating people with humanity woke, Martin? What if it was your daughter or your son? Look, I'm incredibly disappointed that I have been so misconstrued. I have never suggested that I would ever put any at-risk prisoner into the general population, and nor did I ever suggest that putting a prisoner who is a risk to other prisoners in the general population. That is why I've been very clear. There are many complex, bespoke risk, prisoners and risk assessments which are completed by skilled, experienced prison staff on a case-by-case basis is the way forward. At the end of the day, Martin, we are talking about 0.3% of the prison population. I'm focusing on the other 99.7%. I have worked with female offenders. I have seen the abuse that they have suffered. I would never, ever put a female offender in a position that brought back any angst or worry or concern to a female prisoner. Can I make that perfectly clear?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you're talking about 0.3% of the prison population. That doesn't matter. This was a Supreme Court ruling. Biological sex is everything. And this example is proving that Reform UK do not believe that. And during this disastrous damage control interview, Vanessa Craik then made things even worse by revealing that Nigel Farage actually knew all about her position before giving her the job and suggesting that it could even become official Reform UK policy. But first, if you're anything like me, you've spent so much time trying to find the perfect skincare treatments for your face, only to realise you've been neglecting the skin on your neck. But as I've got older, I know that's a massive oversight because the neck is on display all the time, yet lots of folk just treat it as an afterthought in their routine. And I know I'd fallen into that trap. And what's been interesting actually is since starting this campaign with Go Pure, I've spoken to many in our Outspoken audience, many women who tell me that they know the skin on their neck is thinner, more delicate, and less oily than facial skin, and they need specialized care, but they just don't know where to get it from. And so I have to say, that is why Go Pure is the answer. It is an absolutely beautiful product. This is the Go Pure Tighten and Lift Neck Cream, and it's transforming the lives and necks of women and some men too, all across the globe. So let me tell you about this gorgeous product, because I saw a noticeable difference within just weeks. Oh, and by the way, Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure if you use the code DAN, that's DAN, at checkout today. So just head to gopure.com/Dan, use code DAN, and you're all set. But what's so amazing about Go Pure is that its proprietary firming complex is actually designed to visibly firm and smooth the skin on your neck and chest in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. In a consumer study, 100% of users said their skin looked more supple, 97% noticed a firmer appearance. Indeed, Go Pure's full line of science-backed skin and body care have delivered for over 100,000 real women with real results. It's dermatologist recommended, cruelty-free, plus with over 1 million jars sold. I don't think you can say this is a beauty secret anymore, right? Because it's not a secret, if you get what I'm saying. So, tighten, lift, and restore elasticity in your neck, because your skincare routine shouldn't stop at your jawline. And for that limited time, Outspoken viewers and listeners get 25% off Go Pure using the code DAN, D-A-N, at checkout. Just head to gopure.com/Dan, use the code DAN, and you are all set. Quick favor too, after you buy, when they ask you where you heard about Go Pure, make sure you tell them it was after watching Outspoken. But now, back to the show.
What kind, on a case-by-case basis, for example, what kind of biological men perhaps could be allowed into a female prison?
Look,
I think people just want some clarity.
Again, Martin. Okay, look, if you've got a complete trans woman who has completely transgendered to a female, has been living as a female for the last 30 years, is not a sex offender, has lived their life as a woman for the last 30 years. What are you now telling me that we put them into the general population in the male estate? Because to me that isn't humane, and it is not counting decency. I'm not saying that person should be in the general population in the female estate. This is a minefield, whichever way you look at it, whichever way you swing, whichever thoughts you have, it's a minefield, and it's always going to be difficult.
And Vanessa,
yes,
just
the
one
law
final,
is the law,
just,
and I abide by the law.
Just one final question. I just think people just want some clarity, and that is this: is this your personal opinion, or do you think it could become Reform Party policy?
I don't know. I haven't had that conversation. Nigel Farage is very aware of my position and what I think, but he still hired me.
So it's not at all clear. And Martin Daubney gave her every single opportunity to say, oh, no, this is just my personal view. It's not Reform UK policy. Haven't even discussed this with Nigel. Nigel did the tiniest amount of damage control today, posting this on X: I have never supported men in women's prisons. But that isn't good enough. That isn't good enough. You haven't ruled out this absolutely insane proposition. And as a result, you've now lost support of the trans exclusionary radical feminists who view J.K. Rowling as their idol. Jack Jewell posted on this: what on earth are you playing at, Reform? This is basic. You know trans women are men. Astonishing. You don't need to have worked as a vet to know what a cat is. Even Flip-Flop Keir Starmer has said the Supreme Court ruling means sex-based spaces are for biological sex, not identity. This is utterly foolish and extraordinarily out of touch with your voter base. I'm fuming. And then Belle Staffy revealed something fascinating. She's another women's rights campaigner. And she said, after Reform UK's disturbing announcements earlier today on men and women's prisons, the sound on the ground is that Reform UK's prison advisor Vanessa Frake, MBE, is a trans rights activist. They've been infiltrated. She speaks trans and has no regard for imprisoned women's safety or dignity. Also, Reform UK intend to scrap the 2010 Equality Act. In effect, that would nullify the Supreme Court's decision on sex-based rights. It would be extremely bad news if a pro-trans Reform UK was elected into government, and she said that was from an anonymous source. So to my superstar panel, Lauren Lunn-Farrow and David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party. Now, David, I know your position, and the Heritage Party is absolutely clear on this. And I would say Reform's position after that madness is as clear as mud.
Yeah, well, Nigel Farage very surprisingly answered the question with a complete word salad. You really didn't know what he stood for at all after that press conference. And hiring this woman, Vanessa Frake, is something which, boggles the mind. I would never, ever hire someone like that to be a spokesman or an advisor to me in the Heritage Party. We're very, very clear what needs to happen. We would remove the concept of gender from law entirely, whether it's gender transitioning in the Equality Act, the Gender Recognition Act 2004, we would scrap that, repeal that, and remove it completely, because I don't actually recognize the concept of gender, which is different to biological sex. Someone who's a man can say they're a woman, but they're still a man. They can have operations done on their body, they can mutilate themselves, but that doesn't make them a woman. It means they're a mentally ill man who's mutilated themselves. And when it comes to society, we have these areas, prisons, hospitals, schools, and sports, where we need to protect men and women, of course, women mostly, from men getting into women's spaces and potentially assaulting them, doing other things, acting in perverted ways. This is just basic common sense that everyone had 30 or 40 years ago before the trans hysteria hit and has grown and grown over the last 10 years. But now, with the Supreme Court ruling, we even have the Supreme Court that says women's spaces are for women only, not for men, not for trans people. We shouldn't need a Supreme Court ruling to tell us what is basically obvious from science and nature. But it seems that Reform have become as loony left as the Labour and the Green Party on this issue. And people are seeing through them.
It's absolutely mad. I mean, Lauren Lunn-Farrow, of course, you are a media strategist for many years. You worked sort of dealing with these public messages from high-profile people or organisations. Surely, if you were working for Reform UK right now, this would be a total nightmare, because it's very obvious that Nigel Farage doesn't want to rule this out. So he's got everyone around him saying, I saw Dame Andrea Jenkins, for example, on GB News last night saying, no, this isn't policy, this isn't Reform policy. But he has refused to say that.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I just want to make the point that the video of Vanessa is like an X Factor audition. I couldn't take it seriously when she was winning. I just thought it was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Look, I think Farage, I've just lost all hope in him. He says big, bold statements and doesn't actually see things through. He's towing the line. He's playing the game. He's hedging his bets. With Rupert Lowe, I know what to expect. I know who he is. I know what he believes in, and I believe he will see things through. With Farage, this is just another example of him saying one thing, standing for one thing, and doing another. And also the fact that you're putting spokespeople ultimately forwards for the party with no media training. This is an absolute PR disaster. The ums, the ahs, the questions keep coming. She's got no idea what the questions are that are coming. Whoever set this up should be fired.
Yeah. And of course, what it is importing the establishment. If you import the establishment into your party, you get an establishment position on a lot of things. But I think this has to be an issue now, where all of us who are sane just say, there's no flexibility. There's no grey area. This is one of those red line issues. And I honestly think it was so important when it came to Donald Trump and the White House, right? If we cannot agree very, very clearly what a woman is, what a man is, and that a man can never be in a women's space or competing in a women's competition or being in a women's prison, then we've lost our mind as a society. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people looking at Reform UK, including a lot of women who I've spoken to, thinking, God, we thought that these guys were on our side and now we're not so sure. And by the way, just as a sign, I guess, of how far the debate has shifted, J.K. Rowling, I think she celebrated her 60th birthday, and there was a fascinating exchange between her and India Willoughby, who is one of the most vile men in the country, trans rights activist, who posted on X, "Weird to think we were born just 4 weeks apart in the same year and turned out so differently. Me, a woman, her, a billionaire hate propagandist who relies on trans folk for relevance." Wow. J.K. Rowling, though, she owned her in her savage reply, writing, "Only 4 weeks apart, we're practically twins. Yet on the one hand, you've got someone who created a whole fantasy world, and on the other hand, you've got..." Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.